So welcome everyone, and thank you for joining us to talk about the hidden health impacts of cooking with gas. My name is Nicole Kearney, and I have the pleasure of moderating today's webinar on behalf of CLASP and the European Public Health Alliance, or EPHA. So I'm the Europe Director for CLASP. We're an international NGO that works to ensure the appliances we use are life-changing, low impact, and environmentally responsible. EPHA is a European NGO alliance advocating for better health. They bring together national and European public health civil society organizations, including health professionals and patient and disease groups. With their unique and diverse membership, they are working to improve health and strengthen the voice of public health in Europe. EPHA is a change agent in the public interest, independent from commercial funding. So before we start today, I have a few housekeeping points. Today's webinar will run for 90 minutes, hopefully allowing for some dynamic discussions and audience Q&As. We'll be muting all participants' microphones given the large number that have joined us. And we encourage you to submit any questions via the Q&A function. We'll try to cover as many of those as we can. The webinar will be recorded and posted on CLASP's YouTube channel, and we'll circulate a link after the webinar along with the slides to all participants. So before we kick things off, I would love to hear from the audience. We have 2 poll questions for you, which you can answer by selecting your chosen option here on the screen. First of all, we'd like to know what cooking appliance you use in your home: gas, electric, which includes induction, solid fuel, or other. And if you have multiple, go ahead and select the one that you use the most. Our second question is whether you're aware of any health risks associated with gas cooking. So it's a simple yes or no answer for this one. So we'll just give everyone a minute to wait for the results. All right, maybe we can close that and see some results come in. All right, we have 61% of people on today's webinar using gas, 37% using electric, and we have nearly 70% of people are aware of the health impacts of cooking with gas, with 30% who are unaware. So thanks everyone for answering those questions. I think this provides some helpful insights to today's audience and helps put us in the right context for our discussion. Because so all over the EU, all over the EU, millions of people have been cooking meals in their kitchens, unaware of the hazardous pollutants emitted by the gas hobs or gas ovens, including, it seems, a fair number of people who are with us today. Because of the cold and perhaps to reduce the costs of their high energy bills, they've maybe even kept their windows closed, or perhaps they're not using their range hoods. Today, CLASP and the European Public Health Alliance have launched a new report that finds that all gas cooking appliances release pollutants that are harmful to human health and the environment, and that they can emit levels of indoor air pollution that may violate EU outdoor air pollution regulations. So today we have 2 of the co-authors here with us, Christina Prikop from EPHA and Michael Scholand, a senior technical advisor to CLASP, will share more of the findings of this research, including the specific health and quantifiable societal impacts. We'll then also hear from an expert panel on how gas cooking is putting people in the EU at risk and what actionable solutions can help remove the toxic pollutants emitted by gas hobs and ovens from our homes. Joining Christine and Michael on our panel are Tanya Vandenberger from ANEC and Carolina Coronan from ECOS. We'll also share with you some exciting new work that we're going to be undertaking over the next few months to explore this issue even further. Finally, to close out the webinar, we'll have one final poll for the audience. So with that, I'm delighted to introduce Christina Prokop and Michael Sherland. Christina is a junior policy manager at the European Public Health Alliance, where she focuses on air pollution and antimicrobial resistance. Her work on clean air focuses on the health and climate co-benefits of a just transition to clean heating and cooking. She holds a master's degree in political science from the Central European University in Hungary and a bachelor's in politics and international studies from the University of Warwick in the UK. Michael is a senior technical advisor to CLASP. He works to support governments around the world in the development and implementation of energy efficiency programs and policies. With over 20 years of experience in energy efficiency, Michael has a bachelor's of science in mechanical engineering and environmental studies, and a master's in civil and environmental engineering, both from Tufts University in Massachusetts in the US. So I'll now hand over to you both to share the concerning findings from our research.
Great, thanks, Nicole. And I will just start by jumping into the first slide here. Let's see if this works. It says I can control your, there it goes. Okay, great. So hello, everyone. As Nicole said, I'm Mike Sherland. I'm going to be presenting the report with Christina. And let's start by just giving an overview of the project and what our main goals were. So this effort was undertaken to gather evidence on the health and environmental impacts of gas cooking appliances and to provide policy recommendations to address harmful pollutants emitted by those appliances. And so what we're going to cover today, what is included in the report, which is live and posted today, and everyone who's registered will receive a link to that report. That includes a literature review of existing European and international research on health and indoor air quality. It looks at emissions analysis through both simulation studies and product testing that was conducted at TNO in the Netherlands. There's also a policy review and a cost of cooking assessment across the EU included in the report. And then finally, a review of the test methods for measuring the efficiency of cooking hobs. I just want to mention here that in terms of how the work was conducted, we had an international panel of 12 experts working with us, primarily European, but a few from the US as well, who are working on gas cooking appliances in the US. And they, we call them our peer review panel. They were absolutely fantastic. They supported us by reviewing our draft analysis, giving us guidance on structure, on papers, on findings, and so on. So we're very grateful to our peer review panel. And I also want to recognize TNO, who conducted the literature research for us, the product testing, and the simulation studies. I want to acknowledge EPHA, which, Christina in particular, who provided further health-related research to complement TNO's work, also policy advice and the drafting of the report. Christina is a co-author with us on it. And then finally, I want to recognize and thank the European Climate Foundation, who provided the funding for this research. And with that, I'm going to hand over to Christina to start off the presentation relating to the health findings. Christina.
Thank you very much, Michael. Hello, everyone. Thank you very much for tuning in. To start off the summary of our report, let's have a look at an overview of the situation in Europe. So the map that you see over there shows the percentage of households using gas for cooking in the EU member states, with the highest percentages being the darker red ones and the highest being close to 70%. And we're, of course, particularly concerned about the impact on public health in those countries which have the highest level of gas cooking, as we will go on to see the negative health outcomes that are associated with pollution from gas cooking. And the European Environment Agency, in fact, recognizes air pollution as the biggest environmental health risk in Europe. While ambient, so outdoors air quality is regulated at the EU level, however, much less has been done for the indoor environment, although we tend to spend the overwhelming majority of our time indoors. So as we'll see in the next slide, for households that use them, gas cookers are one of the main sources of indoor air pollution, and they lead to detrimental health impacts. Gas cookers emit nitrogen dioxide, NO2, carbon dioxide, particulate matter, and other harmful pollutants. The World Health Organization, the WHO air quality guidelines, which apply to both indoor and outdoor environments, include limit values for the top 3 pollutants that you see there, and their harmful effects have been long established in a very, very robust literature. So for nitrogen dioxide, for example, it causes a range of harmful effects, especially for the lungs. And we now know that it causes harmful effects at levels lower than thought before, which is reflected in the fact that with the latest revision of the WHO air quality guidelines, which took place in 2021, we saw a reduction for the limit value by a factor of 4, which is the biggest reduction that we see for any of the pollutants included in the guidelines. And the WHO also points to gas appliances as one of the major factors in people's overall exposure to nitrogen dioxide. So whether or not you have a gas stove, gas appliance in your house, that determines to a large extent how much nitrogen dioxide you breathe in. Carbon monoxide is odorless, colorless, but a dangerous air pollutant. It causes headaches, nausea, dizziness, and at very high concentrations, it can even lead to death. Particulate matter is an umbrella term for small particulates that can penetrate deep into the lungs, and the smaller ones may even enter the bloodstream, which makes them particularly dangerous. And particle pollution has harmful effects on health that range from decreased lung function to even heart attacks. And one additional pollutant that I want to highlight is methane, which in relatively low concentrations, as we normally see with gas cookers, is not harmful to human health as such, but it is a very, very potent greenhouse gas. And it also has an indirect effect on health because it contributes to the formation of ground level ozone, which in turn is associated with premature mortality. For the brighter side of the picture, we do have a cleaner alternative, and that is electric cooking, which features no fuel combustion, and therefore it does not emit nitrogen dioxide, carbon monoxide, or methane. Now, what can we expect to see in our homes? What can we expect to breathe in our homes? Turning the percentages on the previous slide into absolute numbers, we know that over 100 million EU citizens currently live in homes that cook with gas. And the TNO simulation found that people in these households may be regularly exposed to dangerous levels of NO2, nitrogen dioxide. This simulation study included factors such as the average cooking frequency and duration, the kitchen size, the outdoor air quality in different parts of both rural and urban Europe. And it then built 4 scenarios. The baseline condition, what we can imagine to expect today, a condition where we see an improved building air tightness, a third condition with range hoods, and a 4th one with electric cooking. Now, for the third scenario, I do want to point out that this assumes adequate functioning and maintenance of the cooking hood and a hood that is vented to the outdoors. And this table presents the results of the simulation relative to whether the households would violate the WHO air quality guidelines and or the EU's ambient air quality directives. Two things to point out regarding the air quality directives. One, this is from 2008. It's currently being revised, hopefully to be more ambitious moving forward in the EU. And secondly, we use them as a reference point, although they don't apply to the indoor environment because there is no equivalent legislative framework for indoor air quality. And that is why, as I'm sure will be mentioned later on as well, eco-design is very, very important for addressing emissions from gas cooking appliances. So what TNO found in the simulation is that the levels recommended by the WHO or mandated by the EU for outdoor air are regularly exceeded multiple times per week when cooking meals with gas appliances and without sufficient ventilation. The red yeses there represent cases where breaches occur, and you can see the table becoming greener as we move towards the right-hand side, with electric cooking being the clean alternative with no NO2 emissions. So in that case, in that scenario, violations really only occur when outdoor air is so polluted that simply its infiltration indoor leads to dangerous levels of NO2 in the household. Now, what does this pollution mean more concretely for us, for people? One of the most concerning impacts of gas cooking is related to the burden of childhood asthma. So children in general are at greater risk to indoor air pollution because of a number of factors, including the fact that they are more active, they have higher breathing rates, higher lung surface to body weight ratios, they have smaller bodies and still developing immune and respiratory systems. So a few years ago, a meta-study found that children living in a house with gas cooking have a 42% increased risk of current asthma. So that is of experiencing asthma symptoms in the last 12 months. And this is a global study. It includes some 41 research papers from across the globe, and they found very small variations, which point to a potential conclusion that the differences in built environments do not impact significantly this link that we see between gas cooking and childhood asthma. So based on this previous meta-study, as well as other data sources and databases, TNO estimated in their report that over 700,000 children in the EU have suffered asthma symptoms in the last year due to cooking on gas. On a more positive interpretation of this would be to say that 12% of current pediatric asthma cases could be avoided if gas cookers were removed from those European homes. And finally, going to look at broader health impacts, the literature review revealed a broad set of health impacts on both children and adults, which are associated with air pollutants which are also emitted from cooking, from gas cooking appliances. So for children, the body of evidence has linked combustion-related pollution with adverse effects on the nervous and the respiratory system, and this includes learning deficits, psychiatric problems in the transition to adulthood. We've seen asthma and also an increased susceptibility to lung infections. Meanwhile, for adults, research has shown that air pollutants lead to negative impacts on the nervous, respiratory, and circulatory systems, which just goes to confirm once again what we know, which is that air pollution ends up impacting virtually every organ in the human body. So to mention a few, these impacts include irritation, inflammation, infections of the respiratory system, impacts on the liver, the spleen, the blood, and even cancer. So this has been the overview of the first couple of sections of our report. Thank you for your attention, and I'll hand back over to Michael.
Thanks so much, Christina. So let me advance to the next slide. So I want to continue by talking about fossil gas, which is neither natural nor clean. There's been a lot of money spent by the fossil fuel industry on marketing campaigns to promote gas as a safe, clean, and natural fuel, that it's healthier, sustainable, and cost-effective. It should be noted that the IPCC, the International Panel on Climate Change, has cited fossil fuel marketing as a key obstacle to ending the climate emergency. We were surprised to learn in our research that there are over 1,800 lawsuits at the moment worldwide relating to the fossil fuel industry, and many of them on misleading advertising. In fact, both Shell and BP have been rebuked by regulators in the Netherlands and the UK, respectively, demanding that they end campaigns misleading the public. And fossil fuel advertisements have now been banned in France, and bans are being considered elsewhere. This is a very interesting finding for us. Now, there is this organization I mentioned here called the Global Cook Safe Coalition. That's a hyperlink to their webpage. So this is a new organization that is working on gas cooking around the world, trying to highlight the health and environmental impacts associated with that. They are involving environmental organizations, professional chefs, and corporations to raise awareness to promote cleaner and healthier kitchens. And both EPHA and CLASP are founding members of the Global Cook Safe Coalition. So I do encourage you to visit their website. I was going to say next slide. I forgot I have control. Excuse me. There we go. So one of the key findings, Christina highlighted the impact on children's health and childhood asthma. This is another key finding for our report. So the International Respiratory Coalition estimated, sorry, let me take a step back and just define something called the disability adjusted life year, because this is a term of art that was new for me when I was working on this project. And I learned that a disability adjusted life year refers to a year of healthy life lost due to sickness or disability. DALYs, that's the term they use for them, allow us to estimate the total number of healthy years lost due to specific conditions. And if one DALY is prevented, it means that we have saved 1 year of a productive, healthy life. So the International Respiratory Coalition has estimated that asthma across the EU 27 is responsible for 1 million disability adjusted life years. And of those, 73,000 disability adjusted life years, DALYs, are attributable to asthma due to cooking on gas. And so that rolls up to an EU societal impact of 3.5 billion euros annually due to this cost. So there is a tremendous hidden cost that's being carried by society because of the gas being used to cook our meals. And so in our report, we look at this issue, and the calculation was done for us by TNO, and all the references for that are provided in the report. And then we started to look at alternatives, at clean alternatives, as Christina highlighted, electric cooking as a great alternative. And we found, doing some market research in more than 10 EU countries, that infrared hobs, so heating with infrared light, are comparable on a cost basis with gas, that electric hot plates were cheaper in the marketplace, and electrical appliances such as air fryers and microwaves offer lower cooking solutions. And also the cost of gas, the unit cost is rising faster than the price of electricity. And so with our projections in the report, you'll see that in fact, electric cooking becomes cheaper as an option in the future, just a few years out, and is already cheaper, in fact, in the Netherlands today. And then we looked at whether governments might choose to provide an incentive to move the market towards electric cooking. Like, for example, in the US, there's a subsidy or an incentive of $840 to switch to induction cooking. If the EU countries, member states were to offer that, the return on investment in terms of societal investment would be between 5 and 16 times over the initial outlay, the government incentive. So very interesting findings for you there, looking at hidden costs and solutions. This, sorry, there we go. And then one of the key, one of the options that is considered or discussed quite frequently is that ventilation is a solution here. But really, it's just a patch, and it's not a comprehensive solution to the problem. When used correctly, ventilation does help to reduce air pollution caused by gas cooking in the homes. However, the ventilation, often many households don't use it, particularly during winter, because it's pumping warm air out of your house. There are recirculating ventilating hoods, not always externally ported, as Christina mentioned in her overview. People don't always like to run them because they make so much noise, and you're standing right there at the hub and you're trying to hear your family or talk to your friends. So there's a lot of reasons why these aren't used. In fact, our research found ventilation is inadequate in over 80% of the houses. So yeah, so and in fact, the EU regulations on range hoods do not consider pollutant capture efficiency. So one of the things is that with recirculating hoods, they will remove odor, but they won't remove the pollutants. They won't remove the nitrogen dioxide or the carbon monoxide or the particulates. Those pass through and just get recirculated in the home. So they're not a solution. Okay, sorry. Next slide, just in terms of the gas cooking, we should bear in mind that this undermines the EU carbon neutral targets. So one of the things that we did as part of this project, we purchased and tested 6 brand new European gas hubs. We put those hubs in a lab in TNO, and they were tested under a range of conditions, mainly to study the impact of mixing them with hydrogen. But we also just switched them off and to see, what would happen at regular gas line pressure. Do these hubs leak methane, leak natural gas into our homes? And the answer is yes, in fact, they do. Off does not mean off. They are in fact leaking a small percentage of methane all the time. They're switched off. We then compared the findings of TNO to the US research that had been done on these, and we found that they were right in line with the same levels of emissions. And of course, methane is a much more potent greenhouse gas than carbon dioxide, and the US calculated the emissions rate there was equivalent to the CO2 emissions or the greenhouse gas forcing of 500,000 cars. So this is a huge problem, and it's something that we need to be concerned about as the EU tries to become a carbon neutral market by 2050. Let's go to the next slide. Another part of the study, we looked at the gas is also undermining the electrification and efficiency objectives. So pollutant concentrations, essentially indoors, when you make your building more efficient because you want to save energy, you reduce the number of air changes with the outside. And that, without changing the cooking fuel, can increase the concentration of pollutants in the home. So really, in terms of a system basis, when we're looking at homes and improving the performance, a building upgrade, it's a wonderful opportunity to change the cooking fuel over to electric, to have a more holistic solution, and to have an indoor air quality improvement overall. Next slide, please, Nicole. Maybe that's okay. So yeah, and then another solution that's sometimes touted is hydrogen, and this is something the industry has been pushing quite hard in the last few years, and there's been a lot of investment in it. A lot of governments have also gotten behind it, but we want to highlight some issues here because hydrogen is really not a viable solution. So there is, at the moment, insufficient research on emissions and health impacts associated with those emissions. We studied a mixing solution at TNO where we took those 6 hubs I mentioned earlier and we mixed hydrogen with natural gas and then measured the emissions from those to see how they compared to those same gas hubs just cooking or heating, running gas. And what you see here, the photo is the setup at the TNO lab. The red cylinder there is the hydrogen. The gas was coming from the mains, and they were mixing it in percentages from 0 to 40% hydrogen. And essentially what they found was that the levels of it didn't reduce the levels of pollutants that are harmful to human health. And I talk about that actually on the next slide. But I just want to say that another factor here with hydrogen is that the molecules are significantly smaller than methane. And so they're much more prone to leaking in old gas networks and domestic pipelines within people's homes. And hydrogen also has a lower ignition concentration, a higher flame speed, a greater flammability range, and it burns at a higher temperature than methane, which means it could also oxidize more nitrogen. And these present significant challenges in terms of creating cookers that would use gas and hydrogen. And in addition, it would also mean the need to upgrade all of the existing gas cookers across the EU if a blend of hydrogen were to be introduced. Because if we just go, and one other key point here, as I mentioned, all of these concerns about hydrogen, the UK government did an analysis, a risk assessment, and determined that a switch to hydrogen boilers could cause 4 times as many house explosions as gas. So this was a study that they reported, and it's because of all of these factors I'm mentioning in terms of the size of the molecule and so on. So it's really not a solution. Next slide, please. So here, just to say, here's some results of the TNO emissions measurements. So as I said, they tested 6 hubs, and you can see along the x-axis there, the percentage of gas going from 100 to 90 to 80 to 70 to 60, and the difference being made up with hydrogen. And overall, we found a 6.5% increase in nitrogen dioxide, the main pollutant that Christina was highlighting earlier as being particularly problematic. On some models, it jumped up significantly. On some, it went down ever so slightly. The main point here is that, in terms of the market, what's out there, we don't know. How will it behave in the existing infrastructure if a 20% hydrogen mix were to be introduced into these cookers without any modifications? We did find as well that carbon monoxide levels increased across all models. And in fact, on one model, the carbon monoxide increased by a factor of 9 at 40% hydrogen. So very concerning finding on that particular cooktop. So just here on the recommendations, we just have 4 key points here to close on. The EU policy at the moment does not protect people from the dangers of indoor air quality associated with gas cooking. And we say here that the EU Commission should adopt laws protecting households from harm, specifically setting pollutant limits through the eco-design review on domestic cooking appliances. And they should communicate more with the public about the gas cooking hazards through the energy label and other means of communications. At the member state level, governments at both member state, national, and local governments should vote in favor of people and planet conscious regulations, including incentivizing efforts to accelerate the transition to electric cooking. As I highlighted earlier for the United States, it's happening now, as well as full home electrification. Individuals, so regular EU citizens, can protect their health by making the switch from gas to electric cooking as soon as possible, using induction, plug-in appliances, electric fryers, microwaves, other solutions that don't involve combustion of a fuel, whether it's gas or hydrogen, in your home. And it's that flame, it's that combustion that is causing those health problems. And Christina, you had a recommendation as well for health professionals.
Yes, thank you, Michael. I did want to speak to the last recommendation there regarding health professionals and say that this issue, this link between gas cooking and health is one that is not well known enough among decision makers, among the public, although we're lucky to have today a knowledgeable audience, but in general public terms, this is not really the case. And it's also not well known enough in even some parts of the health community. But the health professionals are such a respected and such a trusted source, and it is important that we have their involvement. As a public health organization, we're also very much aware that there are so many demands and requests placed on health professionals, but we really think that this is one of those issues that is worthy of attention, and we would like to work with health professionals to help raise public awareness regarding the impacts of gas cooking on increasing air pollution and on increasing the risk of childhood asthma in particular. So yeah, we hope to work with the health professionals together towards this goal. And I believe this concludes our presentation on the report. Thank you very much for your attention. Looking forward to the conversation and the Q&A session. And Nicole, over to you.
Thank you so much for that very insightful and clear overview of the report, Mike and Christina. So I already see some good questions coming in through the Q&A and the chat. Please do continue submitting them through the Q&A, and we'll pick those up as we go along with our discussion. So moving on, I'd now like to introduce the audience to the rest of our panel so we can kick off our discussion and start answering some of your questions. Joining Christina and Mike on today's panel, we have Tanya Vandenberger, who works for ANEC, the European Consumer Voice in Standardization. She is the Senior Program Manager responsible for the safety of domestic appliances, specifically electrical appliances, gas appliances, and machinery, and for child safety. Tanya has been with ANEC since 1995 when it was first set up, and she represents ANEC in several European Commission working groups and in the Senelec Technical Board and other European standardization committees. Tanya holds a master's degree in industrial sciences. We also have with us Carolina Koronen, a climate and energy program manager at ECOS, which is a Brussels-based NGO with a long track record of advocating for ambitious sustainable product policies in the EU. She has followed the revision of the eco-design and energy labeling regulations for cooking appliances since she joined ECOS in 2021. Carolina previously worked in academic research and holds a Master's of Science in Environmental Engineering from Lund University. So I'm going to stop sharing slides here so we can see our panel. So yes, thank you to our panelists for joining us for this webinar today. We have a few questions to kick off the discussion. And again, to the audience, please do keep submitting your questions via the Q&A. So first of all, I think it would be great to hear from each of you on the panel why it is important to do this research now in particular. And perhaps, Carolina, we can start with you.
Thank you, Nicole. And first of all, thank you, Mike and Christina, for the very comprehensive presentation. It's a very interesting study indeed. Yeah, why now? Why is it important now? Well, maybe there's like a macro and a micro perspective to this question in my view. The micro being that the file is open on these product-specific regulations, as you've already mentioned. The review of the eco-design and energy labeling regulations for cooking appliances, which includes both gas and electric appliances, is under review right now. Unfortunately, in the sort of preparatory work in this review, the JRC who've conducted the preparatory study have not really looked into this topic of the health issues from gas appliances. So in that sense, this is a great complementary research that we're really hoping that the Commission takes into consideration for their review. The macro perspective is that, you know, it has been evident to many of us for a long time that we need to steer away from gas, but even more so after the energy crisis that we've seen in the last year, and the sort of ambition that has been communicated by the Commission through the Repower EU, for example, with a possible ban on gas boilers. It wouldn't, you know, trying to address the gas cooking appliances along with the gas boilers is the only natural thing. It wouldn't make sense to switch off gas from heating but not from cooking. So it's very well timed in the bigger policy perspective there as well. So, you know, a climate crisis, health hazards, energy crisis, we need to get European homes off gas, and preferably yesterday. So the sooner the better.
Thank you, Carolina. Perhaps, Mike, you can jump in with your thoughts.
Yeah, thanks, Nicole and Carolina. I guess, I mean, I sort of had highlighted or alluded to this a little earlier when I was speaking to the slides, but you know, the cost of living crisis is also a factor that is something that is on everybody's minds at the moment. And really, as things stand, as I said, it is cheaper in the Netherlands to switch to electric at this point. There are electric solutions that are less expensive on a first cost basis than gas hubs. You know, however, it is in fact you know, essentially prices are to the advantage of gas today. The issue is gas prices are rising faster than electric. So looking at a 5-year time horizon, we see a 12% increase in gas prices relative to electric, which is increasing at about 8%. And of course, with the war in Ukraine, gas prices have been quite volatile lately, increasing quite quickly. And so we really see some, you know, essentially within the lifetime of the next set of equipment that will be purchased, so the equipment regulated by the Eco-Design Directive, there are break-even points. There's points where in many of the EU countries it switches in favor of electric. And this, by the way, what I'm talking about is the cost of cooking, the total cost of ownership of that, not mentioning the health aspects, right? Like, what is it worth to you to have your family free of asthma? You know, like those other things, like setting all that aside and just looking purely at the purchase, the installation, and the fuel costs, you know, that's what I'm talking to now. And then it's just, well, how much do you value as a home? How much do you value the health as well? And if you add that cost in, it gets significant. And in fact, there's a study, I mean, maybe Christina, you want to mention this. There's EPHA published a study with CE Delft earlier last year and found that the cost per household is on the order of 130 euros per year in terms of the health burden affecting them. So there are like direct costs that are being carried by homes because of this. And yeah, so in that sense, in terms of the cost of living crisis, this is urgent and important work to raise awareness around. Thanks.
Thanks, Mike. Maybe we can move to you, Christina.
Yes, thank you. I'll very much be piggybacking off of the responses from Mike and Carolina. What I was thinking is that this research is particularly timely because of the legislative and societal conversations that we're having. So eco-design that Carolina was highlighting, and also other changes that are coming with the legislative framework, such as the Energy Performance of Building Directive, where we're reimagining our built environment, and we have got a new relationship with our homes and our home spaces really after the pandemic, or as we've gone through the pandemic, and the air quality in our homes has become more important in determining our health and our well-being as we spend more and more time here. And we've started having this conversation about indoor air quality and ventilation, and particularly from the epidemiological perspective, it's important to understand that there are many components to indoor air quality, and that cooking is one of the key factors determining indoor air quality in the domestic context. And then going to Mike's point, just to briefly mention, indeed, we did estimate the health-related societal costs of cooking and heating on fossil fuels, and it's important to put a figure on it. I think to kind of have an image of the magnitude of the problem. It's difficult to really quantify how much does it mean to you to have your child not experience asthma symptoms, but it provides us with a framework where we can compare or contrast to some extent to some other claims regarding changes in the industry and other developments, yes, that need to happen in the industry to move away from fossil fuels, and that might be costly to some stakeholders.
Thanks, Christina. Maybe Tanya, do you have anything to add from Anek's perspective?
Thank you, Nicole, and good afternoon, everyone. And thank you that we get the opportunity to join you here in this panel on behalf of Anek. So yeah, I mean, the indoor air quality and gas appliances are definitely on the program, on the work program of Anek as well. And well, I don't have a lot to add to what has been said already, but of course, yeah, it's true. We have this crisis, this energy crisis at the moment, but we also see that despite the crisis, still millions of consumers are using a gas cooker in their home, and they will continue to do so. We could also see this from the answer to the first question of the poll, that still a lot of people are using gas cookers. So it's important to protect consumers, to improve the indoor air quality. So it's a very good time to do this study and to do this report, to see what steps we can take and how we can act together. Because consumers, they are, well, they have the right to be protected, no matter what fuel they are using to cook. And we should not forget that cooking is actually an activity that all consumers do. If we compare, for instance, to the use of a sunbed, well, not all households have a sunbed, but we all have a cooker at home and we all need to cook. So it's very important to raise this and to improve the consumer protection.
Thank you, Tanya, and thank you all. I think you all shared some really important points and considerations, and it's very clear that this research is very timely right now, and that the word needs to get out. But however, especially given the results from the audience poll earlier, where 30% said that they were unaware of the health risks of cooking with gas, what are your thoughts? Do you think the panel, does the panel think that most Europeans are aware of the health impacts of cooking with gas? Christina, what do you think?
I think we might have an audience that is more knowledgeable than average. I think it's great that there is interest and there is a level of awareness that we're seeing with this discussion, but I think that at the societal level, this is not the case. And there, in general, if we talk air pollution, we imagine exhaust pipes and we imagine factories, and they're a bit more visual, and they're sources that have been tackled, including by legislation. We have the Euro standards for cars, for example. It's a clear sign that this is a source of air pollution, whereas not having that for gas stoves kind of sends the signal that this is not the case, which is a big issue and one of the reasons why we're doing this work now. And there's studies that show, there's one from a couple of years ago in 7 European countries that compare perceptions regarding different industries and how polluting people think they are. And there's farming, transport, and residential, the residential sector. And the residential sector is always being underestimated in terms of how much it contributes to air pollution. So I think this is definitely something that we need to address more in our public conversations.
Thanks, Christina. Perhaps, Mike, is there anything that you would like to share there?
Yeah, I guess one of the things to add is that you know, this project is not finished. So this is sort of first phase of multi-phase work and work not just by our organizations but many others across Europe who are partners with us on this research. Yeah, so there's a second phase which is going to include a lot of questionnaires and studies, focus groups and so on, to understand the level of awareness in the public domain in many of the EU countries, to see what sort of communication tools are most effective and helpful in terms of getting this information out there to inform people about this problem in their homes. I mean, I have a neighbor here in London, and he's got a 10-year-old boy with asthma, and he has a gas cooker in his stove, and he had absolutely no idea that, and his wife actually works for Public Health England. So she's even a researcher in the health industry. They had no idea of these emission problems here that come from gas cookers. So I think this research is very timely and important. As Christina says, I'm very impressed by the level of knowledge of our audience. So congratulations on that. Thank you.
Thanks. Now, there are, of course, other sources of indoor air pollution, for example, people who smoke indoors or fireplaces. We're also seeing some questions come in where people are asking, you know, they thought that gas was cleaner than open fires. So maybe, Christina, could you tell us why we should worry about gas cooking appliances specifically?
Yes, thank you, Nicole. Gas cooking emits a significant level of NO2, and we now know that nitrogen dioxide is more harmful than we thought before, and that is, as I was mentioning in the presentation, that's reflected in the revisions of the recommendations from the WHO, and those limit values have been reduced by a factor of 4. But additionally, there is increasing evidence that there is no safe level of air pollution. So we really have to tackle all sources of air pollution. And yes, open fire is bad for health. Wood stoves are very dangerous, but so are gas cookers. And so it's really not an either or situation. We need to look at all sources to have a healthy environment in our homes.
Thank you, Christina. It's definitely concerning. So, is there anybody else who would like to jump in from the panel on that one? If not, we have a couple of questions kind of related to this from the audience, specifically asking to clarify what type of gas we're referring to in the research, LPG or other. As well as whether biogas can be considered a clean alternative. Mike, maybe you can take that one.
Yeah, thanks, Nicole. So that's a great question, and thank you for that. So yeah, I guess the issue is, you know, we studied network gas, so gas that comes through the pipes into your homes, not LPG that liquid petroleum gas that you would purchase in a compressed cylinder, for example. These are, yeah, that is just the technology that we researched in this first phase. So that's the main thing that we can talk about. But I did just check with our research scientist at TNO, and he said that he thinks, and we can check this and follow up, but that LPG would most likely have the same health-related pollutants in the home because it is essentially a fossil gas that is, you know, and the flame temperature is the same, right? And so it's that flame, that open flame in your home, and how that interacts with the air surrounding you. That, you know, for example, the nitrogen, right? Our air is 70% nitrogen. when it goes through that flame and it experiences the very high temperature of the flame, you create nitrogen, the flame creates nitrogen dioxide, which is this pollutant that Christina was highlighting as a great concern. So that would exist as well with LPG. It would exist as well with a biogas. Right, so the biogas is not a fossil source, but it is still a gaseous, it's a methane material. And as that is combusted through a burner and you have the open flame, it reacts with the air and creates these pollutants of concern. So I think we really want to move away from open flames in the kitchen as much as possible to protect the health. Thank you.
Thank you. I think that there are more questions coming in from the audience, and we're kind of going through those. But in the meantime, I was hoping the panel could talk a bit about what you believe are the most effective solutions to eliminating the health impacts of cooking with gas from the local to the EU level. Who would like to take that one? Maybe Christina, would you like to kick that off?
Will do, yes. Thank you, Nicole. Well, you can't really eliminate the health impacts of cooking with gas. The only complete solution is to remove the gas cooking appliance and to replace it with an electric one. There are mitigation strategies and they're valid in the short run, opening windows and cooking on the back burners. They improve the situation, they make it slightly better. We are going through this cost of living crisis. So there are things that people can do at an individual level to make the situation slightly better for now, but we also need a broad societal change that is supported by policy and policy frameworks to move away from fossil fuel, to move away from cooking on gas. And the health community can and should play an important role in being more outspoken about the dangers of cooking with gas. And we've seen one recent and important step taken in this direction by the American Medical Association. They adopted a resolution that informs physicians, healthcare providers, and the general public that cooking with gas increases household air pollution and the risk of childhood asthma. So from the position of the health community, I think this is a step that we can take in this direction.
Thank you, Christina. Anyone else want to jump in? Tanya?
Yes, thank you. Well, when it comes to the measures that can be taken to improve the situation, I would first like to mention something about the European legislation, the gas appliances regulation, which dates from 2016. Actually, unfortunately, it's a missed opportunity, we think, because this regulation doesn't define limit values for combustion gas parameters, like for instance carbon monoxide, to improve indoor air quality. So there is an essential requirement in that regulation saying that appliances shall be so designed and constructed that they do not cause a concentration of carbon monoxide or other substances harmful to health. But what is harmful? How is it defined? It is not defined. And which concentration of carbon monoxide is considered as harmful? So that's actually a missed opportunity, because we think from the consumer perspective that limit values that have a direct impact on the health and safety of consumers, that they should be put in legislation. What we have now is that the limits need to be put or set in the European standards. We have an example of the European standard for CO alarms, because of course that is a recommendation that is sometimes given to consumers. Please install a CO alarm. The thing is that the CO levels in that standard, they are of a higher concentration than what is allowed, for instance, in the WHO guidance document with acceptable CO exposure concentrations for humans, which is also a pity. So we think it should not be left to the standardizer to put these limits, but to the legislator to put them. Yeah, so that's a first thing we think that needs to be improved by the legislation. Maybe a second item for improvement is market surveillance. You can have wonderful legislation, you can have wonderful standards, but if it's not enforced, then these standards and this legislation is of little value, you see. And we have seen that there has been a joint European market surveillance project on CO detectors some years ago in 2013-14, where 25 CO alarms were tested in a lab. And the conclusion was that only 3 models were okay. So all the others were not. So 18 of the 25, they were non-compliant with the relevant requirements, and 4 models were alarming earlier than required. There is also a joint European market surveillance action going on right now on gas cooking hobs and hot plates, which is also interesting for, well, in light of this report, of course, and we are participating as stakeholder in this action as well. So, but the results are not yet known. So I think these are 2 aspects from the consumer side which are important to keep in mind, and of course also awareness to consumers, because they are not aware sometimes of the dangers that CO involves. I mean, because we can't see the gas, we can't smell it, and it can be fatal in just a couple of minutes. Thank you.
Thank you, Tanya. I think you raised some very good points there that, you know, even if the European Commission does set limits, they have to be enforced, and that can be challenging. There's a lot kind of riding on making sure that those gas appliances don't emit harmful pollutants. And I guess we need to think very carefully about what is the best way to eliminate any risk in the kitchen. So thank you. I think, of course, one of the solutions is to just make the switch, right? Make the switch to electric and completely eliminate gas appliances from the home. But won't it be costly for households to buy new electric appliances? Mike, I think CLASP has done some analysis on this. Could you maybe talk a bit more about it?
This is the analysis that, haven't I already discussed that? The electric replacement with gas and the government incentives. Is that what you're referring to, Nicole? Yeah. Yeah,
I thought it might be helpful just to reiterate, given what we're just hearing now about making the switch.
I mean, as I said, the economic analysis is in the report, and there's a technical support document as well with additional information on the studies. And so we used, for example, Eurostat data, energy prices, and gas usage, and so on. And all the calculations were consistent with the approach followed with the JRC as well, to make sure that what we prepared was as palatable as possible to the eco-design review process. And in essence, ignoring health, right? Because we have not estimated any of the costs in these calculations, just setting that aside and just looking purely on a first cost basis for the equipment and the gas cooking. Essentially what we're projecting with gas prices rising faster than electric is that electric cooking becomes favorable in the near future or within the regulatory period of this eco-design measure for many of the EU countries, and it is already that way today in the Netherlands. So, so we do encourage folks to take a look at that calculation, to look at those numbers, because these are critical issues. And then when you start to include consideration of the points Christina's making on nitrogen dioxide and Tanya's point about carbon monoxide, I mean, these are pollutants that come from gas. You cannot get rid of them. They're, you know, what is a safe level of carbon monoxide in my home? How about 0? You know, I don't want this stuff around me, my kids, or anyone, right? And same with nitrogen dioxide. So what's that worth to me? Quite a lot. You know, I actually have an induction cooktop in my kitchen for that reason. But I actually did it for safety, because when I had kids, I didn't want them to get burned. I was worried they would. I have a friend who had burned her hand on a gas stove when she was a child, and I was like, you know what, I'm just going to get induction so that I don't have to worry about my child's hand, you know, around the kitchen when I'm cooking. So anyway, anecdotal story. Carolina, go ahead.
It's actually an accidental hand, but I have something to say anyway. I just want to, you know, when we talk about this, the cost of switching to electric cooking, I just want to, you know, say it out loud that the first thing we do is to stop installing new gas cookers, right? I mean, we're not looking at doing this by the end of this year, even though from a health point of view, that would be great. But, you know, number one is stop selling new ones on the market. And even if we get a policy towards that today, there will still be some time in between. It's you know, and as you say, we have to think about this in the longer term. The society, and probably with rising gas prices, we are going to be able to count this cost back. But the perspective is a little bit longer. I just want to stress that.
And I wanted to also quickly jump in on this point around costs of living, costs of health impacts, and bring in one additional aspect of this, which is linked to health inequalities, and the fact that it is people from lower socioeconomic background that are more likely to live in smaller kitchens, to ventilate less, and so they will be more exposed to the negative health impacts from pollutants from gas cooking. And I think it is important to consider this, and again, not to place burden on individuals, but to create that framework that supports the society, and in particular vulnerable groups, to make this transition and to avoid health inequalities of this sort.
Thank you all. I think very, very important points there. So just looking at some of the questions coming in from the panel, there are a couple of questions about the calculations used to determine the population attributable risks for asthma from the use of gas for cooking. Does anybody want to take that question on?
I'm happy to take a stab at it, Nicole. So yeah, so I guess we're talking about population attributable factor in terms of what proportion of total childhood asthma is due to gas. Now, I mentioned anecdotally my neighbor with his 10-year-old son experiencing asthma and having gas stove. But of course, there are other sources of pollution, such as, you know, well, I live in London, so we have air pollution from cars and industry. We have other sources in the home as well. Could be molds and so on, although his house isn't moldy, but you know, that can happen. And so these are all factors that can contribute. The estimate that we have is 12% of children across the EU countries. And this is coming from the European Respiratory Society, a study that was done with over 30,000 households back in 2003. So it was quite a few years ago. However, there were several studies done in the meantime, which have indicated that the proportion of asthma in children is remaining about the same. Like, you know, the number of gas cookers has not gone away. So we know that there is pollution from gas cooking in our home. That pollution has an effect. some proportion of the asthma cases are attributable to that. And the best science, the best epidemiologists working on this issue have found around 12%. And it's very interesting for those of you who are following this issue quite closely. Just last week, a paper was published in the United States where they actually found 12.7% of current cases of childhood asthma in the US are attributable to the use of gas stoves. So this number is right in line with the latest research. It's coming from a long history of research, decades, in fact, and it gives you a number. It gives policymakers a number. It gives national leaders a number, and a number of children and a cost to keep in mind when they consider policies. And as Carolina said, it's not about going out and ripping out the stoves out of everyone's home, but it means let's stop putting new ones in. Let's stop making this problem worse, right? And then let's try and help those households who have them with incentives to make that conversion, so they can also have a healthy home and a healthy kitchen. So I don't know if that helps. Thanks. Does anyone want to add anything more? Christina, is anything you want to add?
I think that about covers it, but I maybe just to say that this number that we're using is still being used in the literature. It's still being cited. It comes from a very big study that was a big effort, but it's been reconfirmed by different smaller studies, more localized ones, so not as easy to draw an EU-wide number from them, but it does look like this number is reasonably and relatively stable enough, at least for us to have this estimate that would give us an image of the magnitude of the problem that we're looking at. And that was it. But Tanya, I think maybe.
Yeah, Tanya,
wants to jump in.
would you like to jump in?
Yes, thank you. Yeah, just to add to what Carolina and Mike were saying about, that so many households still have the gas cookers at home and will continue to use them. It's true, you cannot get rid of them by one day or 1 week. That's impossible. But therefore, awareness raising to consumers is important as well, of course, in this respect. And also to tell consumers that it is important that they let their appliance install by a professional and properly, and also the maintenance of a gas appliance in general is very important for consumers, just to avoid, for instance, the CO poisoning and the prevention of that. So thank you.
Thanks, everyone. So I think maybe we can talk a bit about the challenges ahead. We have a question from the audience on what are the biggest barriers and possible drivers to the transition away from fossil fuels. So could the panel share what they believe those challenges are and what is needed to overcome those challenges? Carolina?
Yeah, so I don't know if the question from the audience seemed very high level, but I'm going to focus here on the appliances, since this is the focus of the session today. One major challenge for making the switch from the gas appliances to electric ones in certain regions, at least, is the distribution system and the electrical connections to the buildings. Sometimes this is put forward as something unique, as a challenge for cooking appliances. I would say this is a similar problem that we have to overcome with electrifying other sectors like transportation and heating. So this is a bigger problem in the context of the bigger electrification. We need to make sure that we have a distribution system that can cope with these new types of loads. And the solution to this, I would say one of the main things we need to ensure is to have clear signals and long-term visions to get there. And in the context of cooking appliances, I think comparing again to, for example, boilers and the intentions that we're seeing there, it gives mixed messages if you're saying that we're going to get rid of gas for heating but not for cooking. So we need a clear message, and we need it now if we're going to have it done 5 years from now, 10 years from now.
And maybe just on the back of that issue, because certainly the connection capacity thing is something I've been thinking a lot about. And there are, for example, you can buy countertop electric hubs that are, plug in the wall. And, so like you do need more capacity if you've got 4 hubs on your installed cooktop. But if you could have a countertop one where it's 1 or 2 hubs, which has a capacity that is simply based on the load that you have available in the wall socket. And another emerging technology which is coming onto the market are cooktops or stoves rather, which have a lithium iron phosphor battery in them in the bottom drawer of the oven. And the interesting thing with these is that they can trickle charge over time on a low capacity network. And then when you go to cook, draw on the battery to supplement the oven and the hubs, in addition to the power coming in through the mains. So those are 2 short-term solutions on the cooktop, but I completely agree with Carolina. If a country has not yet upgraded its infrastructure, it needs to address that issue, the electrical infrastructure I'm speaking about, because electric heating of homes and electric transportation are necessary steps as well to move to the carbon neutral 2050 objectives.
Thanks, Mike. Thanks, Carolina. Any other thoughts to the challenges, or perhaps we can kind of jump onto our final question, which is, given that we're now nearing the end of our discussion, we're getting close to the end of our webinar. I'd like to give our panelists an opportunity to share some closing thoughts, any closing remarks. So if there's anything that you'd like to kind of share as a key takeaway for you on this or for the audience, please do. Otherwise, thinking forward and building off of the study, what do you think are the next steps to better understand the health impacts of gas cooking across the EU? And is there any additional evidence or research needed to really establish this robust evidence base and identify realistic solutions? Maybe Tanya, would you like to start with any thoughts?
Thank you, Nicole. Yeah, I mean, as I already mentioned, it's important to improve the indoor air quality to protect consumers. The market surveillance is important, the enforcement. Also, for the carbon monoxide and the combustion gas parameters, it's important to introduce these limit values in the legislation. That's important to get better control of the whole issue. Awareness raising to consumers is important as well, and we hope that we can all join forces to do so. So maybe just one last point about carbon monoxide is that studies have shown that a long time exposure to a very low CO limit or CO value can cause dementia and Parkinson disease. So there it would also be important to look further into this, into the long-term effects and the health effects. So we should also not ignore that factor. Thank you.
Thank you, Tanya. Maybe Carolina?
Yeah, I think as a final remark, I'd like to circle back to the eco-design regulations that are under revision right now. And I would just like to say that from our point of view, this is an excellent policy tool to address not just the health, but the climate benefits as well of phasing out gas cooking. This policy tool is made for this, to limit emissions to air for products that are sold on the internal market and deliver benefits for consumers. So to me, it's a little bit like we are looking at all these nails and we're holding a hammer in our hand. So let's just hit them.
Great, thank you. Very well said. Christina?
Yes, thank you, Nicole. I think today's conversation and thinking about how complementary all our remarks have been, I think this is the kind of multi-sectoral conversation that we need, and that we need to bring this issue higher on the political agenda, because we know how harmful gas cooking can be to our health and to the environment, to patients, to consumers. But this is something that really needs to be addressed at the decision-making level. And we as EPHA, we've been working on this. We've been organizing sessions on indoor air quality, conferences, discussion, including one at the European Health Forum Gastein, which is one of the important annual events in the health and health policy community. And we were very pleased to hear from the Commission during that session that we have to get out of gas wherever possible, and we think that it is possible to get out of gas when we're talking about cooking. So we'll continue to engage with this process, also with eco-design. And two other points, sorry. One other point is we will also be doing a manifesto with the health community. So stay tuned for that. We want to mobilize and engage the health community more, bring their voices to the decision makers. And the final reflection was around the need for more research that has been highlighted, including by questions from the audience. And I think that's true. I think we need to conduct more research, and I think that is going to happen. Very excited about that. But also, I think we have enough of a knowledge base to already move and raise awareness on the facts that we know, and to strengthen the policy measures to phase out gas.
Thank you, Christina. That's good. That's great. And maybe Mike, you can jump in with a bit of a preview about what we have coming next.
Yeah, and just before I talk to this last slide, I just want to say I fully endorse the closing remarks from my co-panelists. I loved Carolina's analogy of we've got a lot of nails and we're holding a hammer, let's just do it. And what Christina is highlighting is, yeah, we can get more nails, right? We can do more research and we can, increase the number of nails, but we do have enough information here to act. And I think that is what we're hoping will happen now with the Commission in the eco-design on household domestic cooking appliances. So phase 2 of this project is actually already underway. And I was in fact shooting a training video for it just this weekend. We are launching a field study. We are going to be measuring air pollution in over 250 households across the EU and the UK. And in this household, we're setting up in the homes measuring equipment. So equipment that will take 1-minute increment measures of nitrogen dioxide and carbon monoxide. Also, we'll be measuring PM 2.5 and CO2 levels. We'll be measuring when the stoves are used. The families we'll be working with them for 2 weeks to collect this data. They'll be cooking, hopefully at least 4 times a week, so we get a good sample set of data. 80% of those households are going to be gas, 20% are going to be electric. So we're going to have a case and a control and really get a feeling for what is happening in the field, what are families experiencing here. So please stay tuned. We're going to get that data out hopefully before the summer, but we're working very hard now, and we'll be launching this study starting with the Netherlands later in just a couple weeks time, actually. Yes, and so I guess Nicole since you're in charge of the project, do you want to say just a couple more words on this slide, or have I answered it well enough?
No, I think that's great. More to come. Watch the space.
Thank you.
So maybe we can. I guess first of all, thank you so much, all of you, for this great discussion and for the great contributions and questions from our audience. And I think this just really highlights the need to get the word out on how dangerous gas cooking can be for European households. So just with all that in mind, let's finish off with our second audience poll very quickly. If you or someone you know cooks on gas, based on what you've heard today, would you support the switch to electric alternatives? And we're looking for a yes or no answer here. So we'll give folks a minute to share their feedback. All right. You can see the results. Great. This is 70% would be willing to support the switch to alternatives. So it's great to see there's already a lot of support for a transition to cleaner cooking across the EU. But with 30% still there, it's clear that some more work needs to be done. So I'm glad that we're going to be pursuing this in the coming months. So I just want to close out with some key takeaways from today's discussion. First of all, again, thank you to all our speakers for their excellent remarks, and to Christina and Mike for the thought-provoking presentation. And again, thank you to our participants for taking the time to join us and for your great questions. I think the findings from this research are quite clear. Gas cooking releases harmful pollutants that are dangerous to our health, particularly to children. Gas cooking is costly to society, and we urgently need policy interventions to prevent hazardous air pollution from being emitted by gas cooking appliances. We've heard that the European Commission has an opportunity and, dare I say it, an obligation to remove air pollution directly from the source through the Eco-Design Directive. And electric cooking offers a quick and easy solution, as cooking with electricity does not release any harmful combustion pollutants into your kitchen. The transition to electric cooking needs a boost, clearly, and national governments are well positioned to incentivize this technology, offering significant societal benefits. We've also heard that costly investments in hydrogen or relying on ventilation and people's behavior are not the answer. And really making the switch from gas to electric will help ensure our kitchens don't get us sick. So with that all being said, I urge everyone to please take a look through our report and help spread the word. So thank you very much, everyone, and goodbye.
Thank you. Bye, everyone.